The deal room is buzzing. Bankers are smiling, slides are flashing on screens, and somewhere in the deck there is a neat arrow showing day one value flowing from a new acquisition into the parent company. Buried in the appendix, there is a single line that says cyber due diligence, completed, and for most people in the room, that is enough. You are listening to the audio version of M&A Malware, security debt hidden inside acquisitions, a Wednesday headline feature from Bare Metal Cyber magazine, developed by Bare Metal Cyber. This episode is about what really sits behind that single line, and why every acquisition is also a major security decision, whether anyone names it or not. For growth leaders, mergers and acquisitions, M&A, feel like a clean strategic move. Buy capability, buy market, buy speed. But attackers see something different. They see a chance to ride into a larger, more lucrative environment on the back of a smaller, less protected one. When your organization buys a company, you are not just buying customers and technology, you are buying years of accumulated security decisions, good and bad, and you are tying your own risk story to theirs. Over the next few minutes, we are going to treat that reality not as a scare tactic, but as something you can plan for and manage deliberately. In many organizations, the story starts long before security even hears there is a deal in play. Corporate development teams, business sponsors, and bankers shape the vision of synergies and market capture, and by the time a Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, is invited into the conversation, the narrative is already hardened. The term sheet is mostly done, timelines are compressed, and everyone has an incentive to keep momentum going. At that point, the security function is not informing the decision, it is being asked to validate it. That structure creates the first blind spot, because any serious risk finding is automatically framed as a problem to manage after closing, not as something that could reshape or stop the deal. The traditional due diligence package makes this worse. It leans heavily on policies, certifications, and slide decks that talk about industry-standard controls and segmented architectures. Even when there is no intent to mislead, those materials are selective and optimistic. They often reflect what the target company aspires to be, not how it operates on a rough Tuesday afternoon. When the acquirer accepts those materials at face value, the deal room fills up with reassuring green indicators that hide the real fragility underneath. The CISO may sense that the picture is too clean, but without direct access to systems, logs, and people, that sense is hard to convert into a clear challenge to the deal. The power imbalance in the room also matters. Finance wants to preserve valuation, legal wants clean paperwork, and business sponsors are invested in landing a strategic win. Security comes in with questions that sound like friction: asset inventories, identity sprawl, incident histories, and third-party chains. If those concerns are not directly tied to things the deal team cares about, like price, indemnities, or timing, they will always lose to the desire to close. That is how organizations quietly end up inheriting more security debt than anyone intended. The structure of the process makes it nearly impossible for cyber risk to alter the trajectory of an attractive acquisition. To work with this reality, it helps to get precise about what acquired security debt actually is. Some of it is the obvious technical layer: unsupported operating systems, aging databases, flat networks, and monitoring that has not kept up with cloud migration. Some of it lives in identity, where years of ad hoc access changes have left a heavy trail of overprivileged accounts, one-off exceptions for power users, and third-party logins that no one really owns. Some of it is about data and privacy, unknown data stores, informal analytics projects, and casual data sharing that was fine for a small firm, but sits badly in a regulated group. There is also governance and legal debt, which is often the most dangerous. That includes policy frameworks that exist mostly on paper, incident records that are incomplete or minimized, and past exposures that a small private company could treat as minor, but a large acquirer might be expected to disclose. Once the deal closes, regulators and plaintiffs will not care that you were not the owner at the time. They will see one brand, one balance sheet, and one accountability chain. When you buy a company, you inherit the past as well as the future, and security debt is the mechanism through which that inheritance shows up. If you think in these categories, you can start to describe security debt in terms that matter to deal sponsors. Technical gaps can be framed as remediation projects with a price tag and a timeline. Identity and data issues can be framed as ongoing operational risk that narrows your ability to innovate safely. Governance and legal debt can be framed as potential regulatory exposure and reputational cost. The aim is not to eliminate all security debt from every acquisition. That is unrealistic. The aim is to decide what kind of debt you are willing to take on, at what discount, and with what plan to pay it down, instead of finding out by accident 6 months after closing. The riskiest part of the story is not the signing announcement. It is the integration window that follows. For 6 to 18 months, both sides are changing systems at high speed. Networks are being connected, routing is being adjusted, and identity systems are being tied together. Monitoring teams see new patterns of traffic, new log sources, and a constant stream of configuration changes. Almost anything odd can be explained away as another migration artifact. For an attacker already present in the acquired environment, this is ideal cover. They can move carefully, blend into the noise, and wait for the moment when a new trust path into the parent opens up. From the attacker's perspective, an acquisition is a leverage event. A foothold in a niche product company or a small service provider becomes much more valuable once that company is pulled inside a larger group. When new virtual private network connections appear, when admin tools are shared, or when identity synchronization starts, new routes open toward more sensitive systems and richer data. If the acquirer is not explicitly looking for this pattern, they can end up building a lateral movement corridor into their own core while congratulating themselves on a successful integration. During this integration rush, many risky decisions are made under pressure and never revisited. Temporary firewall rules are created and never removed. Broad service accounts are granted just for the migration and then left with more access than they need. Legacy protocols are re-enabled to support one-time data transfer and remain in place because other work takes priority. Each compromise may be understandable in context, that together they create an environment that is more permissive and harder to reason about than either side was before the deal. Leaders who have lived through painful post-acquisition incidents can usually point back to these decisions and see the chain clearly, but only in hindsight. Changing this pattern requires treating integration itself as a high-risk program, not a generic project management exercise. That means setting the expectation up front that some timelines will flex to make room for security controls, rather than assuming that controls will bend to meet timelines. It means defining the early integration period as a time of heightened suspicion and monitoring, where certain categories of activity are investigated even if they could plausibly be explained as migration noise. And it means being deliberate about where you will not grant trust until you have enough evidence that the acquired environment behaves as expected under your standards. The work starts before the deal closes, with a different approach to cyber due diligence. Instead of relying on slide decks and certifications, an evidence-driven approach asks for concrete artifacts. That can include asset inventories and how they are maintained, samples of access reviews and how exceptions are handled, recent incident reports and what changed afterward, and maps of critical third parties and their security obligations. A target company that cannot produce these basics, or that insists everything must be explained verbally, is sending a strong signal about its maturity, regardless of how polished its presentations look. To make those findings matter, they need to be translated into the language of the deal. That may mean estimating how much it will cost to bring the target up to your baseline and how long it will take. It may mean flagging incidents that could become reportable once you own the company, or identifying areas where integration will have to be staged to avoid unacceptable risk. When you present it that way, you invite the sponsor and the chief financial officer to make a clear choice: accept the risk and the cost at the current price, adjust the terms, or reconsider the deal. The important thing is that security debt is no longer a hidden add-on.
It is part of the negotiation. Once the deal is signed, integration without infection becomes the guiding principle. Instead of assuming trust on day one, you treat the acquired environment as untrusted until it proves otherwise. That does not mean blocking collaboration. It means putting a staged approach in place. Network connections can go through tightly defined segments or modern access layers instead of a full mesh. Identity integration can start with understanding roles and entitlements before enabling single sign-on everywhere. Critical communication and code platforms can be brought under your monitoring early, while more complex workloads wait for a deeper look.
This approach only works if people and accountability are set up to support it. If security integration is just one line item on a giant program plan, it will be the first thing compromised when schedules slip. A more sustainable model is to run a dedicated security integration stream with its own governance, clear executive sponsorship, and a mandate to slow or reorder technical steps when needed. That stream should report into the same forum that tracks synergy and financial performance, so leaders see that realizing deal value and managing security risk are part of the same story, not competing agendas.
Underneath all of this, governance and accountability are what determine whether cyber risk really has standing in your M&A process. If the CISO is not a named stakeholder for significant transactions with direct access to the board or deal committee, then their input will always arrive late and carry less weight. Formalizing that role means defining when security sign-off is required, which categories of findings trigger escalation, and what options are on the table when serious issues appear. Without that clarity, everyone is implicitly signing up for close the deal now, fix it later, even if no one says it aloud.
Boards and executives also need a more honest narrative about what they are buying. Instead of vague assurances about strong security, they should expect a simple summary of the security debt that is coming with the acquisition. That includes the main categories of risk, the ways those risks might turn into incidents or regulatory obligations, and the estimated cost and time required to remediate them. With that information, the board can ask grounded questions about whether the exposure is acceptable at the current price and timeline, given the organization's other priorities.
Sometimes, the answer will be that the deal is still worth doing, as long as certain conditions are met. That might mean insisting on remediation steps before closing, negotiating specific indemnities, or setting aside funds to support the security uplift. And sometimes, the right answer will be that the strategic benefit does not justify the security debt, at least not at the current valuation. Saying no to a deal, or reshaping it significantly because of cyber risk, is rarely celebrated, but it can be one of the most effective ways an organization preserves value and protects its long-term resilience. At its core, this story is about changing how leaders think about growth. Instead of seeing MA as purely a financial and strategic lever, they start seeing it as a technical and security event of the first order. They ask different questions in the deal room, they demand different kinds of evidence, and they design integration in a way that assumes attackers are watching. When that mindset takes hold, MA stops being an unexamined malware vector and becomes a managed part of the risk landscape, with eyes open and trade-offs made on purpose.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.